Welcome to Sermons from the Living Room. I want to speak today on the important topic of how to have a quiet time. It just will be the beginning of the series that I want to do, and it is so crucial that we talk about this subject. I'm thinking about a man named George Mueller. Some of you may be familiar with him. He lived in the 1800s and is probably best known for his care for orphans. Through his ministry, over 10,000 orphans were cared for. He started 117 schools with over 120,000 children that were affected by him over the years. He was such a man of faith. I remember reading stories of him where he had these orphans to care for and there was no food in the cupboard, and he would just pray and someone would show up with food, or he needed some money and at the very last second, as he's praying and praying and praying, God brings just the money in the mail that he needed for that day. He was such a man of faith, and he's known for that. But the thing that strikes me is his quiet time with God. There's a resource that you can get on the internet. It's free, just George Mueller on personal devotions. I printed it out, I have it in a notebook form, and I'll be sharing some of the thoughts from this in this study because I've learned from him on how to have a quiet time. But here's one of the things that he says. What is the most important Christian duty? The most important Christian duty is having a daily quiet time with our Heavenly Father. I think he's absolutely right, having a quiet time with God. And yet I'm afraid that many of us really don't know how to spend time with God alone, and there's a good reason for our lack of knowledge. No one ever really taught us how to do it. It would be like someone telling me, Tim, go fly a plane. And I'm thinking, okay, all right, I'd really like to do that, but I don't really have a clue as to where to begin. And if you're smart, you probably would not volunteer to come with me on my maiden voyage. Or Tim, go perform brain surgery. Man, yeah, Ben Carson, me, yeah, we can do this thing, I'm on it. I wouldn't say that you should volunteer your noodle to be the first thing that I would operate on, though. Why? Because obviously flying a plane and operating on someone's brain takes great skill. It takes a lot of learning, it takes training, it takes practice. And meeting with the God of the universe doesn't? What makes us think that we can navigate through space with teaching, but coming to our Maker would be just as easy as pouring cereal into a bowl? I believe many of us, when we became a Christian, were told, go meet with God every single day. It's very important for you to do that. But few of us really ever had a mature Christian sit down and teach us how to do it. I'm not saying in any way at all that I've got this all figured out. I feel like I'm still learning every day how to meet with God, but I have been trying to do this for 40 years now, and I have learned at least a few things that I think are important for that meeting. I want to talk to you about what, without question, as George Mueller said, is the single most important act that you and I have to do every single day as Christians, and that is to meet with God alone. We're going to look at a request by a man named Moses who really wanted to see the glory of God and learn some key principles, I think, in his story that can teach us how to meet with God alone. We're going to learn instructions on how to have a quiet time with God. What's important for you and me if we're going to have an audience with God? What should we keep in mind for such an encounter? What should we bring with us? Where's a good place to meet with God? What do I do when I get there? And as I said, I think far too many of us have been told to meet with God, pressured, guilted into meeting with God, but we're never instructed on how to do it. So I'm going to get very practical in this as I give us some daily principles on how to meet with God alone. If you have your Bibles, turn to them to Exodus chapter 33. And in that passage, I'll talk about 10 commandments for meeting with God devotionally and daily in a quiet time. The first thing is what I want to share in this video, and that is desire to see God so that you can give him glory. Meeting with God begins with a desire. And obviously, you and I know how to desire things. And the things that we really desire, guess what? We make time for it. You seldom hear a golf addict complain that he doesn't have any time for golf. He makes time. People who are into working out at the gym, they get there regularly. Shoppers find time to get to the mall. Antiquers find time to hit the nooks. Volunteer firefighters find time and they write it into their calendars how to get to the station. We desire all kinds of things. But what I'm saying is the things that we really desire, we make time for. Now comes the million-dollar question. Do we desire to see God? To really answer that question, we won't listen too much to what a person says. We're going to look at what they do. Golfers are known by their time at the course. Firefighters are recognized by time logged in at the station. True shoppers prove their zeal by making the stores a regular part of their routine. So too, true desires of God, they make that desire known, not by their speech, but by their actions. They show their desire to see God by effort to see him. And what it comes down to is a desire that is matched with time. Moses had a desire to see God and to give him glory. Exodus 33:18, then Moses said, now show me your glory. Moses is bold. He knows that God understands his heart. There's no need to try to know God. Beating around the bush is a waste of time. God knows what Moses wants. The all-seeing, all-knowing God knows what's on Moses' agenda. So Moses makes no effort whatsoever to conceal it. He says, God, I want to see you. I really want to see you, Lord. And I want to see you now. This desire of Moses is really amazing when you consider that he'd already had some incredible encounters with God. Consider some of his previous sightings. In Exodus 3, verse 2, it says, there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to take a look at it, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. What an encounter with God. And then in Exodus 24, Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the glory of God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. You know, imagine that. What an encounter he had with God. Later in that same chapter, it says Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the seventh day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain with God for 40 days and 40 nights. What an encounter with God. What a meeting with God. In Exodus 33, it says Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down, and it would stay at the entrance, and the Lord spoke with Moses. What an intimate encounter and meeting with God. In Exodus 33, verse 11, it says the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks with his friend. And then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. I mean, come on. Moses had seen God at the bush. Moses had gone on the mountain on a couple of different occasions and had seen God. Moses regularly would go to the tent of meeting where he would talk to God face to face like a friend. This guy, Moses, was all about hanging out with God. He was all about the presence of God. He had seen God up close and personal, like few others before him or after him have ever had the privilege of seeing him. But you'll notice that all those sightings of God did not satiate Moses' desire to see more of God. In fact, we could say that every time Moses saw God, he gained a greater desire to see him. And herein is a wonderful principle for us to recognize. Desire for seeing God comes from seeing God. The more you see him, the more you will want to see him. Sadly, the reverse of that is also true. Not seeing God leads to a desire less to want to see him. Don't you find that true in your life in other areas? I'm good with not playing golf, to be honest with you. It takes a lot of time. It's expensive. But when I do play one day, I think, man, I miss this. And then there's a little trick that the golf course plays on me. I have a horrible round. That's fairly typical. And I think I'm going to quit this dumb sport once and for all. But on the very last hole, I make a putt. And I think, man, I'm kind of good at this game. I think I'm going to play this thing some more. Or I'm out of the gym for a long time, and I don't really miss it all that much. But then one day I work out, and I think, you know what? I'm going to get back to doing this. I haven't hit a yard sale in months, but then I hit one, I find a bargain. I think, man, why aren't I doing this every week? The same thing happens with God. If we don't meet with him, we grow calloused to meeting with him. But if we taste of his fellowship, oh, how we are compelled to do it more. And the implication for this is so clear. If you don't spend time each day meeting with God, you'll actually desire to meet him less and less. But at the same time, there's incredible encouragement for us. Desire to see God is attainable. All we have to do is start meeting with him. And our desire to meet him will grow more and more with every passing day. The more we see him, the more we will want to see him. Oh, but let's make sure that we want to see him for the right reason. Sadly, many times I think we seek God for our purposes and not his. King Herod really wanted to see Jesus, but why did he want to see him? Luke 23:8 says, when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him for a long season. He had heard many things of him and hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. Jesus was a sideshow of magic to Herod. I got to see Jesus do a miracle, aren't I something? Herod wanted to boast of his relationship with Jesus. That's why he wanted to see him. Wrong reason. There was a corrupt desire to see Jesus by the crowds quite often. John 6 says, Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. They wanted a king who would overthrow Rome and make their lives easier. Their pursuit of Jesus had nothing to do with him, but everything to do with what Jesus could do for them. To them, Jesus was just a ticket out of hardship. James says that many times we come to God in prayer, but it really isn't a desire on our part to see God or to give him glory. It's for ourselves. James 4:3, you ask and receive not because you ask amiss, that you might consume it upon your lusts. We look at that and we think, you've got to be kidding me. A person would actually pray out of their own lust for things? But I invite you, as I invite myself, to consider, why do we come to God? Why do we want to see him? Are we like Herod? Do we just want to boast that we've seen him? What quiet times I have with God. Well, who's that about? Me? Are we like the crowd? Do we want to see Jesus because we're in a jam and we need his deliverance? Seeing God is really just about relieving my discomfort? Who's that about? Me? Are we like the people that James writes about? We have an agenda to bring to God. And it's all aimed at one thing, getting my list approved, having God give a nod to the things that I want. Well, who's that about? Me? I'll be honest with you. I remember when I was younger, I had a big ball game one day. I always made it sure that I met with God on that day. Why? Because I wanted to play well that night. And somehow I figured that if I gave God a little time in the morning, he'd help me score some baskets later at night. Sometimes I still find myself in that mindset. I want my day to go well. I want this meeting to go well. I've got this important thing coming up. Better meet with God that day. The good luck charm and the rabbit's foot, and maybe God will give me a good day. That's all about trying to meet with God for me. How different was Moses' desire to see God? Moses wanted to see God because of the glory of God. He wanted the glory of God to be seen. He wanted God to be magnified. And he knew that if he could see that glory, he would be able to present that glory and talk to others about that glory, and God would be praised. He wanted to meet with God, for God, not for himself. What would happen if you and I stopped coming to our times with God each day for us? What if we didn't look at it as a good luck charm so that our day would go well? What if we didn't use the whole time to give our laundry list of wants to God? What if we had no thought of meeting with God so we could tell others that we were meeting with him and boasting about these amazing experiences we were having with God? What if there was no desire in us to meet with God for us? What if we only really wanted to meet with God and see him because we knew that God wanted to be seen? What if we came to him to know him and to learn his agenda and to see his glory, that we might become imagers of him and reflectors of his glory to the world? It's a crazy thought, isn't it? But maybe tonight, before you go to bed, you can fall on your face before God and say to him, God, I want to see you tomorrow in all of your glory. And if I'm honest, Lord, I'll say that I want this probably somewhat for me. There's a selfishness on my part. But God, I want to die to that what's in it for me attitude. Would you help me right now tonight to want to see you tomorrow morning, because you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be worshiped. You deserve to be glorified and imaged and proclaimed in your world. Would you help me, Lord, to desire to see you for you? It may begin right now. It may continue all throughout my day tomorrow. I'm convinced this is where having a quiet time with God begins, with a desire for Him. And if we come to Him for any other reason, we'll probably get something out of it, because you certainly can't come to His Word and be void and fruitless. His Word never does that. But can I suggest that if we don't come to Him for Him, then we'll really miss out on seeing Him in all His glory. He's not going to be pleased. And we won't gain from our time what we really should, which is a view of Him and how majestic and beautiful and full of splendor that He is. My encouragement to us all is to come to God with a desire for God. And may He use that selfless act on our part to show us how wonderful He is, so we can live for Him and love Him and worship Him and tell others about Him. That's the first commandment in meeting with God. And I'll share 9 others as time allows. God bless you.